Hi, my name is Dennis and I'm an XRPL developer. I'm teaching the first ever Core Developer Bootcamp here in Paris. So on day one, we're going to be covering some basic blockchain principles, the network and the servers, consensus, ledgers, the protocol. Sort of take a brief overview of all these different sections. Then we're going to navigate through the code base showing sort of where these things happen, where these principles occur inside of the code base. This will be a deep review of the RippleD source code. And then we're going to wrap up the day by compiling the source code, building RippleD, and then running some tests for RippleD. And we're going to also then debug those tests and understand what's actually happening behind the source code. On day two, we're going to focus a deep dive into the protocol. So what we like to call the binary codec, specifically getting into the ST amounts, the transactors, the amendments, how that all comes together. We then jump into a section specifically on transactors, and we go through the life cycle of a transaction. So the different steps that it takes, the different validations that needs to happen, verifying the signature, verifying the transaction is well formed. And then we skip to the two sections on tests. The first section on tests is sort of familiarizing ourselves with where the tests are in the source code. And then the second section on tests is actually running the test and understanding the actual environment of how those tests get broken down. So then on day three, we're going to start to dive into what's called the SHA map, the node store, and the SQL databases, basically how RippleD stores data. We start with the SHA map, going into a deep dive for a few hours. Then we move on to the SQL database and then the node store. On day four, we start with cryptography. This is a two-part session. So we're going to start with identifying where cryptography happens inside of the source code. And then the second part of cryptography is running some tests and identifying and looking at how quantum computing occurs within the RippleD source code, or could occur within the RippleD source code. We're going to have a guest visitor at this time, Atharva from Trinity College, and he's going to be discussing his quantum amendment for the XRP ledger. So on day five, we're going to focus on the quantum amendment. The first part of that, we will be implementing the amendment into the source code. And then the second part is we're going to be running some tests. We're also going to do an activity about the quantum amendments, or how quantum encryption would affect the RippleD source code. We finish up the day with Vito Thomas from Ripple explaining peers and peer-to-peer communication. Day six, we focus on the RPC. So the RPC handlers, different parameters. We're going to take a look at the simulate transaction. We're also going to implement our own custom RPC handler. We're going to run the tests and debugger. And then on Sunday, day seven, we focus on WebSockets. So we're going to subscribe to some live streams. We're going to trigger some WebSocket updates. And then hopefully we will create our own WebSocket integration as well. Day eight, we actually have David Schwartz coming in to talk about consensus. And then the rest of the day is focused on consensus. So consensus UNL, consensus validations, etc. Day nine, we're actually going to walk the ledger, which means we're going to trace a transaction through consensus using the debugger and the source code. We'll have some small lectures on consensus UNL. We'll have another lecture on consensus transaction ordering. And then we'll finally wrap up with the amendment process and how that works. So day 10 is all about amendments. So we'll start with a walkthrough on XLS and how to prepare an XLS. Then we will start to implement our own XLS template. So we'll go into the ledger entries, the binary codec, and the transactors, implementing our own transaction. We do this in two parts, or multiple parts. The first part, we set up the skeleton, so the fields, the transaction. Then the second part, we implement pre-flight, pre-claim, and do apply, while also writing tests to make sure that our code is compiling and building. Day 11, Thursday, we continue with the amendment process. We'll implement do apply and ledger entry logic. We'll also do some unit testing, and then we're going to run it locally and connect an SDK to submit our new transactions directly to our local build of the RippleD source code. Finally, we're going to deploy it to a private network and submit our transactions directly to that private network. Day 12, our final day, we will just summarize everything that we've learned, and then we will wrap up the day with a closing ceremony.